Welcome back to Rare Gameroom Gaming. Today we're talking about one of Nintendo's strangest consoles of all time, the Virtual Boy. It was hyped as the future of gaming, but it crashed and burned almost immediately. Still, it's become a fascinating piece of gaming history. We're going to talk about how it started, how it was received, the games that defined it, why it failed, and even the shocking news that Nintendo has announced a brand new version of the Virtual Boy in 2025. So buckle up, because this is going to be a ride through one of gaming's weirdest stories.
It came from the third dimension, with its own brain, its own voice, its own legs. There's only one problem. It needs your eyes. Virtual Boy. See it now in 3D.
The Virtual Boy was designed by Gunpei Yokoi, the same genius behind the Game Boy. In the early 90s, virtual reality was becoming a buzzword.
Now, Sega challenges you to experience Stereoscopic 3D. 3D so real, it puts the action right in your face. Not even 3D effects like these can match what you'll see through these amazing Stereoscopic 3D glasses. Games and accessories sold separately. And nothing but the experience itself can give you the challenge and excitement of Sega games like Zaxxon 3D, coming soon, and Missile Defense 3D, Stereoscopic 3D, only on the Sega system. Sega, the challenge will always be there.
Companies like Sega and even arcade manufacturers were experimenting with 3D technology. Nintendo saw an opportunity to leap ahead of the competition by creating something immersive and futuristic. Instead of traditional VR, the Virtual Boy used stereoscopic 3D, with two LED displays projecting slightly different images to each eye, creating a sense of depth. It was released in 1995 for about $179.95, marketed as the next step beyond the Game Boy and Super Nintendo. On paper, it sounded amazing, but the reality was very different.
He had the moves, the punches, the fire. But there was one thing he would never have. A way out. Virtual Boy presents more challenges inside the third dimension. Mario's Tennis, Teleroboxer, Red Alarm, Galactic Pinball. Virtual Boy, a 3D game for a 3D world. Wanna play?
At first, people were curious. The commercials made it look revolutionary, but when players got their hands on it, the problems showed fast. The red and black visuals strained the eyes. Long sessions caused headaches and dizziness. Parents worried about eyesight damage. And to make things worse, you couldn't really wear it. It sat on a table stand, and you had to lean into it like binoculars. It was clunky, uncomfortable, and the opposite of the handheld freedom the Game Boy had offered.
Look here, you've never seen anything like it. New from Nintendo, it's Virtual Boy, the video game system that puts you in the action with incredible 3D graphics, featuring Mario's Tennis. Now, look here, Walmart's got it all, for less. Save on the system, save on the games. The new dimension in video games is at Walmart today, and it's your turn to play.
Now, let's talk about the games, because this is where the Virtual Boy's story really comes alive. In total, only 22 games were released for it worldwide. In North America, we only got 14. That's an incredibly tiny library compared to the hundreds on the original Nintendo, Super Nintendo, or Game Boy. But within that small lineup, there are some interesting stories. Let's go game by game. Wario's Tennis. This was the pack-in game for the Virtual Boy. It was supposed to showcase the 3D effect, and it did. Seeing the ball fly toward you in 3D was pretty neat, but the game itself was bare bones. No career mode, no tournaments, and limited character options. Once the novelty wore off, most players moved on. Red Alarm. Think of Star Fox, but stripped down to wireframe graphics. Red Alarm was ambitious. It was a 3D space shooter where you flew through geometric environments. But the visuals were confusing, and the red lines often made it hard to tell where you were going. It was impressive in concept, but difficult to enjoy for long. Teleroboxer. This was basically Punch-Out! In 3D, but with robots. It used the Virtual Boy's depth to let punches fly toward or away from you. It was fun, but the difficulty curve was steep, and the controls weren't as intuitive as Nintendo hoped. Still, it's one of the more memorable titles. Wario Land. Now, here's the real gem. Wario Land is widely considered the best game on the system. It played like the Game Boy Wario Land games, but took advantage of 3D by letting you move between foreground and background layers. The level design was creative, and it showed what the Virtual Boy could have been if developers had more time. Fans still wish Nintendo would remake this one. Galactic Pinball. This game turned pinball into a space adventure, with 3D tables and even some cameos, like Samus Aran's spaceship from Metroid. It worked surprisingly well, and it's one of the few Virtual Boy games people genuinely enjoyed playing for longer stretches. Panic Bomber. A puzzle game starring Bomberman, it was basically a falling block puzzler like Tetris Attack. The 3D didn't add much here, but fans of puzzle games had something simple and fun to enjoy. Vertical Force. A vertical shoot-'em-up by Hudson Soft. This game let you switch between two planes of depth, foreground and background, to dodge enemies and bullets. It added some interesting strategy, though it wasn't groundbreaking compared to other shooters of the time. Mario Clash. Now, this one is interesting. Mario Clash was Nintendo's attempt to revisit the original Mario Bros. Arcade game, but in 3D. You toss shells at enemies across different planes of depth. It had potential, but felt repetitive. Still, some fans see it as a unique experiment worth remembering. Jack Brothers. Developed by Atlas, this is one of the rarest and most valuable Virtual Boy games today. It's part of the Shin Megami Tensei universe, making it even more unique. The gameplay had you exploring dungeons under a time limit, fighting monsters and collecting keys. It's a cult classic, and collectors pay top dollar for it. There were sports games like Virtual League Baseball and Golf, which used 3D effects but didn't stand out. Nestor's Funky Bowling offered some quirky fun, and in Japan they got exclusive games like Virtual Fishing and Innsmouth no Yasada, a survival horror game that never made it west. All in all, the library was tiny, and only a handful of games are truly worth revisiting today. The Virtual Boy's downfall wasn't caused by just one thing. It was a combination of problems that all piled up at once. The biggest issue was the red and black graphics, which caused eye strain, headaches, and dizziness for many players. On top of that, the console was marketed as portable, but it really wasn't. You had to set it up on a table and lean into it, which made it awkward compared to the Game Boy. The game library was tiny and lacked any real killer apps that could sell the system, aside from Wario Land, which came too late to make a difference. And to make matters worse, Nintendo rushed the Virtual Boy out to market so they could focus their time and resources on the upcoming Nintendo 64. With all these issues combined, the Virtual Boy was doomed almost from the start, and it ended up being discontinued in less than a year, selling only around 770,000 units worldwide. Nintendo wasn't alone in chasing VR. Sega had experimented with a VR headset for the Genesis, but it never made it to stores. Later, Sony and Oculus pushed VR forward with much more advanced technology. Ironically, Nintendo took lessons from the Virtual Boy and applied them years later to the Nintendo 3DS, which perfected glasses-free 3D in a way that actually worked. And now for the big twist in this story. In 2025, Nintendo has announced a brand new Virtual Boy. This time, they're keeping the classic red and black aesthetic, but updating everything for modern tech. The new headset is lighter, doesn't strain the eyes, and is said to be compatible with Switch Online services. The retro gaming world is buzzing. Will this finally redeem the Virtual Boy's reputation, or will it stumble again? We'll have to wait and see. The Virtual Boy may have been a failure, but it's one of the most fascinating chapters in Nintendo's history. It showed their willingness to innovate, even if it meant falling flat. And now, decades later, it's getting a second chance. So, what do you think? Did you ever play the original Virtual Boy? Are you excited for the new one? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more deep dives into gaming history here on Rare Gameroom Gaming.